Okay, once you've installed the EYFS graphs, you should find them all available from this icon here, the assessment icon. I'll click on that. Here are all the EYFS graphs down the list. We can display them simply by sliding them off this menu and dragging them onto the canvas. On my system, I've only got year one data on here, so I'm going to ignore the reception graphs, and I'm going to choose this one here, the average point score for year one. All you do is just drag it off the menu and position it somewhere in the middle of the canvas where you want it to appear, release the mouse there, and up it comes with the data. Sometimes on a slower system, it takes a few seconds to come up with the data, but there you go, there's the first one. So that's the idea. Take them off the graph here just by sliding them off. I'm going to slide this one off as well. Once it's on the canvas, you can pick it up and move it around just by dragging the mouse on the title bar like that. Alternatively, you can actually drag the white canvas to move all the graphs around. It takes a little bit of getting used to this technique in SIMS Discover, because notice there are no scroll bars in SIMS Discover. Let's drag another one onto the canvas. Let's drag this one across. It's the Venn diagram. And this is a 5-circle Venn. It looks rather pretty. That has a circle that represents each of these particular areas of the good level of development measure. We'll go into these in a bit more detail later, but for this first part I just wanted to show you how we can use these graphs in a very basic sense. This is the final graph, the stacked bar chart, and that one looks like this. So there we go, that's how we put the graphs onto the canvas. I'm just going to close these down now by clicking on the cross there. Let's have a look at them individually. I'm going to have a look at this average point score graph first, a very simple looking graph. And as it is displayed here, it's taken everybody in year one and worked out the average point score for all those different pupils. So what it's done there is it's taken the 17 areas and added the 1, 2 and 3 judgments all together and come up with an average point score across all those 17 areas for the pupils in year one. So that tells us that it's 34.03. Well, so what? What we can do with this graph is we can use a technique called graph-to-graph filtering to analyse things like pupil premium, EAL pupils, special needs pupils, and almost any vulnerable group you can think of within year one. I'm going to display this graph now, or this set of graphs. This is the pastoral graphs. And you'll see the top one here is called student totals by key pastoral factors. I'll slide this one off the menu and put it side by side with that one. This comes up with, for the whole school, how many EAL pupils we have, how many pupil premium pupils we have, how many take free school meals, how many have some kind of a medical condition, and so on and so forth down this long list here. Maybe I'm interested in my pupil premium pupils, and I'm interested particularly in deciding whether there is a difference in their attainment in the current year one to the whole cohort. So what I can do using SIMS Discover is I can take these 87 pupils in my whole school and drag them across onto this graph, which represents the pupils in year one. And what this tells me is that there are 33, the average for those pupils in year one is 33.89. Now, because this graph is only showing me year one pupils, this average will only be made up of year one pupils. I can find out who those pupils are by clicking on the actual bar itself, and that pops up with this list, which tells me that there are 9 pupils in this average, and here are the names of those 9 pupils. We can take that a little bit further. We can say, well, here I have some EAL pupils. Does EAL have any factor in my EYFS average point score? So I'll drag the 129 pupils there onto this graph. It will filter out all the non-year one pupils, and you can see that practically, to all intents and purposes there is no difference. Who are these EAL pupils? Again, I could click on the green bar. It tells me there are 25 pupils there. And if I just scroll this screen down, it's a little bit counterintuitive the way we do this. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking the mouse into some white space and dragging down and to the right. And that allows me to reposition the screen like that, and I can see who those pupils are. And just reverse it and move it back. Let's have a look at another graph. Here's the attendance catalogue. And here's a very useful one called percentage session attendance year to date. If I drag this one into some white space, maybe I'll tidy this graph up a little bit by removing that one. And I'll also remove this one as well, so I can see a bit clearer what these two graphs are showing me. So here's a graph that looks a little bit odd with the test data I've got on here, but in your school it'll probably look a bit neater. But we have here a batch of 71 pupils whose attendance has dropped below 95%. Again, that's 71 pupils in the whole school. So if I'm classifying these as my poor attending pupils, I can drag these pupils across there, drop them on this graph, and now I can see a real difference there. So these are my poor attending pupils just in year one, and their EYFS average point score certainly is noticeably lower than everybody else's. Anyway, you can see how we can take this particular graph, drag across lots of the different vulnerable groups in school, and hopefully come up with some conclusions as to which really are our vulnerable groups. Okay, I'm going to close that down. Let's have a look at another graph in a bit more detail. Let's have a look at the GLD Achieved graph. That's this one. This one takes the 5 areas for good level of development. So it's taking maths here, here's literacy, here's physical development, here's PSE, here's communication and language, and adds to them an overall. So these are overall GLD achieved pupils, and also pupils who've achieved the GLD in all 17 areas rather than just the 5 areas that we normally refer to. So we can see here that 88.1% of my year ones achieved a good level of development in maths, 72% achieved it in literacy. Well, here's a question: how many pupils achieved a good level of development in both maths and literacy? What we can do is we can create a little Venn diagram. The way we create a Venn diagram is by taking either of these points and just dragging them onto some white space. Remember, in the previous example we dragged them onto another graph. Well, if we drag a data point onto some white space, it starts to create a Venn diagram. So here we have our Venn diagram. This represents the 52 pupils in year one who achieved a good level of development in maths. Well, here's the pupils in literacy. If I drag them across, I'll start to create a Venn diagram. And we can see that there are 43 pupils at the intersection. So these are the pupils who got literacy and who got maths. But notice there are 9 pupils who got maths but didn't get literacy. So you might be interested in who those are. So I'll click on the number and it tells us who those are. So that's a 2-circle then. I could add the 50% of pupils who got a good level of development in communication and language. Drag them across onto here. And that tells me that 30 pupils got a good level of development in all 3 of these subjects. 13 of them got it in maths and literacy, but not in communication and language. Just staying with this graph a little bit more, just close those buttons down, but staying with this graph a bit more, I should have explained earlier that the blue columns on there represent pupils who have achieved the measure. The red ones, the pink ones, represent pupils who didn't achieve the measure. If you want to, you can show a little legend by clicking on that little small arrow there, but it just tells us what the different colours mean. This works on any graph. When you see that little arrow there, you can show the legend. If you want to, you could just show the pupils who've achieved the measure by clicking on the little cross there next to false. That will take out all the pink bars from the graph, and this shows us just the pupils who've achieved the measure. Here we've got an option that gives us on-roll and leavers. If you have some pupils who've left since the EYFS judgments were made, you can ensure that that is ticked. And you might find that in your school that results in small changes usually to these figures here, because it's now including leavers. The leavers would have to have been marked with this particular year's good level of development and the 1, 2, 3 judgments, but if they were and subsequently left, they would be included. Just looking down at the bottom here, notice how we can display the graph in slightly different ways. At the moment it's showing as a percentage, so all these figures here are percentages, but we could show the actual count of pupils there by clicking on that. We've always got the option to display the graph as a line graph, if that makes sense, but not particularly in this particular case, or even as a pie chart. I think the most useful one for this particular graph is like that. Again, on all graphs, we have this option to click on this little I for information symbol, which flips the graph round and basically gives us a little spreadsheet that shows us how that graph was put together. So all the key data that's on that graph is also on here in a tabular form, which you can, if you wish, export or copy to the clipboard and paste into an Excel spreadsheet. I've just resized it there. If you've got a big screen, that's great. You can make these graphs as big and almost as small as you wish just by adjusting the height and the width there. I'll close that down. I'll go on to the next one. I've created one here called the stacked bar graph, which is very similar to the other one, just presents the data in a slightly different way. This is a stacked bar. Again, the blue part of the columns represents pupils who've achieved the measure, and the pink ones represent pupils who've not achieved the measure. It's almost exactly the same in terms of the data that it's showing. You can also create Venn diagrams from this. Sometimes it's still a bit neater, a little bit more compact. You've got the option there of showing the numbers of pupils. So we have 59 pupils, which is why all these go up to 59. We can show it as a percentage, like that. And the final graph I want to show you is this one, the Venn diagram, which is quite a complicated looking Venn diagram. It's a 5-circle Venn diagram. Each of these circles, or ellipses I suppose they are technically, represents one of the areas. So the orange one here represents maths. So any person within this ellipse has got a good level of development in maths. We can see the most important bit, of course, is the 50.8% of pupils who've got a good level of development in all 5 of these areas. But some of these outlying segments also contain pupils. At the moment I'm showing percentages. Notice I can change that to actual number of pupils. And you can see I've got 13 pupils in this segment here. Who do those 13 pupils represent? Well, sometimes it's a bit difficult to work these out, but if you pull back a little bit from the diagram, you will see that those 13 pupils are not in this yellow oval here. So they didn't get communication and language. So this particular school has got a group of pupils, a largest group of pupils who failed to get the overall good level of development because they didn't get a good level of development in communication and language. So as a school, that might be your focus to move more of those 13 pupils next year into the center of the Venn diagram there. We can see one pupil there who is only in the orange oval, therefore that pupil only achieved a good level of development in maths. We have 8 pupils there who, stepping back a little bit from there, are not in green and are not in yellow and are not in purple. So they didn't get PSE, they didn't get literacy, and they didn't get communication and language either. So you can interpret this in different ways, but that's one way of doing it. You can always, as before, click on the number there to find out who those pupils are. So that's it. It's a very quick tour of the EYFS graphs in SIMS Discover. Thank you.